Today we have Juricek from Denver, and we have Luke Anderson, who was from Wyoming and has moved to Utah. And we have Linda Lillegraven, who is definitely representing for Wyoming. So let's see, why don't we start with Juricek. So hi, Kay. Um, Welcome. Uh, I'm glad you're here too. Okay, so Kay, this is your second year in the show.
Yes.
And I had so much fun. I actually saw your work in a show in Wyoming, and I just fell in love with it. And they were these very little pieces, but they were like little poems, sort of little odes to the landscape out here and the feeling of it. I think you really, that's something you do in your work. And I'm so glad you're on with Linda Lillegraven as well, because I think you two, um, for people who capture the land, there's a lot of this sense of emotion to it, this love of it, and this really knowing the land. And yours in the fun contrast with Linda is that you're really looking at the land as we see it from our cars driving by. I mean, I think that's a big theme with you. And it's something that I would really love to talk about in your work, especially the work that you have. So it's up on the easel next to you. And let's talk about some of these. And I'm really curious about the one that has the truck, you're seeing the trucker drive away and
Oh,
the moonrise.
this
Yeah,
one right here.
yeah,
Yeah, let me move the screen a little bit so you can see and hopefully the glare.
perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't glare. Yeah, on the screen. Yeah, tell us about it.
Well, that was, if hope you can hear me okay.
Yeah, you're
Was
perfect.
on a trip that we took to Arizona. We were visiting friends in Bisbee actually, and we went to Tucson, and we were driving back on a beautiful moonlit night, and the landscape was gorgeous, and the road was so illuminated in a beautiful way with the moon coming up in the east. And in this particular scene, the road just kind of swoops down. And I thought the road captures the contour of the land. You can see the land still in the background. You have the lovely moon coming up. And it was just kind of a wonderful, wonderful blend of the man-made elements with the landscape. And that's something that I kind of like to incorporate in all of my pictures because I do deal with, well, when we're in the West, we drive everywhere. We travel, we drive, we see what the landscape out of our car, we see buildings, we see the highway, we see street lights, we see these kinds of stripes on the landscape. And it's not, to me, it's not in a bad way, it's in a beautiful way. And to me,
Yeah.
it highlights the contours of the land. And
You
in
know,
this particular case, I think
something else
it,
something else that we've talked about is you last year you had that I think it was the Happy Burrito
yes,
painting.
yes.
And you have a couple other paintings of um, buildings and sort of monuments, and I'm wondering if you could show us some of those.
Yes, sure. Be happy to. This next one is a painting of, let me get the screen a little bit better. There we go.
Yeah, yeah.
This is a ramada, and a ramada, and all I know is about the Western US, but it's maybe they occur in the Eastern US, but they're more of a Native American type of a structure. This one that I saw was actually behind a hotel in Alliance, Nebraska, and people had their chairs around, and it looked like they were sitting under there having a few beers and relaxing and enjoying themselves. And I thought that was such a cool structure. I borrowed that image and incorporated that into a more rural landscape. And this is a ramada where people would stop and take a break from drive. So I have a camper there. Somebody was on the road driving and decided to pull over and take a break. So I've been kind of incorporated something from different photographs into this painting. And
When you and I were talking about this painting, I remember before I talked to you about it, seeing the painting and thinking that looks like one of those, like a funeral pyre, that sort of a Native American thing. And you said, no, it's built in like a lot of the roadside stands, and people would
Mhm.
be under those, but they were selling their wares. And
Oh,
so I
yeah.
thought, oh, that is so fascinating.
Like, and you see that sometimes you see the ramadas that are built out of like 2x4s, but then sometimes you see them like this one, like I saw, that was just built out of found materials. And they might be selling jewelry under there, and they might be just hanging out doing a barbecue, or they might be just relaxing in the shade, on a hot day.
Yeah. So let's take a look at the structures, the buildings too
Sure.
that.
This is a building in a town close by here in Colorado, um, and I thought it was just fascinating. It's a bar actually that's in a small town. They're still being used, and so I call this the last stop of the day, and it was just one of the most interesting, fascinating, currently used buildings, a living building that's in a small town here. And I just thought it was just pretty cool. This called the end of the trail, and the lighting, the other structures nearby, they had these trash cans that have buffalo silhouettes on them, and I thought, oh, that's perfect. Um, I just thought it was, and the colors. I thought the colors were just fabulous.
Yeah, it kind of has this sort of there's almost this romanticized or romantic feeling about it too, with the sun setting and it's the end of the trail. And um
Yes.
I mean maybe I'm reading more into it, but it's just sort of this way of life in the West that's kind of quietly disappearing
Mhm.
but it's still alive in places if you go look for it.
And that's what I'm focusing on in a lot of my paintings are buildings that are currently being used. These aren't abandoned buildings. These are buildings that people still love and they still use, like Happy Burrito was last year. That's a current cafe in a small town. People are still using it. I guess they have great food. But the same thing with this. This is a building. This is the building, a bar that people are using now. And I think that's really romantic, maybe is a good word. And it's fascinating, and it's still a living thing, a living part of our heritage.
Hey, Kate, Barbara Stanton is asking what town that is.
I
The
think
end.
that's I think that is in Strasbourg on the way to the Wild Animal Sanctuary. I think that's Strasbourg, little town
Oh, okay.
through on the way to the sanctuary there. Yeah,
Oh, very cool. Okay, good, good. And there's another one too.
there is.
There's another building, yeah. I love seeing the scale of these because online, it's always hard to tell. But I will say this, um, definitely go look online because there's so much subtlety in Kay's work that is not, it's at least it's not coming across on my screen. And so I think, when you go online, and I noticed that the work hasn't uploaded yet. So, Kay, hopefully you've gotten all those to Krista so she can get them uploaded. But really do, if you're listening and you're curious, please go back and look at all the work online because there's a lot of great things that are happening there with the work. Okay, so tell us about this one.
And this is a night scene. This is a building that is in Wyoming, actually, um, and it's a building that's in a town called South Pass City. And I had photographs of this building during the day, and I decided I'd like to make it into a night scene. And so I did. I changed the coloring, I changed the objects, um, but this is as far as I know, still, I mean, mind you, there's a pandemic going on, but I think this is still a building that people are using and selling objects out of. And I call this guarding the store because I put a dog here on the porch to,
Oh,
yeah. So there's an animal there. I put it in the close-ups too on the images that I included for you. So there's a close-up of that, but I call this guarding the store. And have lights in there just to kind of give that lovely illumination to show that people are still using this building. And then I added this lovely violet just to kind of illuminate the skyline there a bit, and that moves into the stars. Um, and so, yeah, I call that guarding the store.
Wonderful. Oh, these are just wonderful. And I love night paintings. I don't know why. There's just something about it. Again, it's just sort of like, I don't know, I guess it in my mind, I go back to maybe when I was a kid, and it just seemed like being out at night with your friends. And
Mhm.
I grew up in the Midwest, so catching fireflies, and which we don't have in Colorado, but just there, I guess it is just sort of that wonderful, fun way of looking back at stuff and
Yes.
enjoying it. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And I wanted to
And
kind of
then
capture that nighttime mystery, but then I wanted to have that. There's something reassuring about having these lights on. You're out and you're way out and in the wilderness, out in the middle of nowhere, but then you have this building that is warm, and that there are people there, and that there's the dog on the porch. And I think it's just kind of um, it's a wonderful thing, I think. That
I agree. And you know what? Tammy mentioned, and I think this is really exactly right on. She writes, beautiful nocturne. Of course, the building has the sense of a human face, a soul.
mm,
And I think that is really, that's just such a wonderful thing that you're doing. You're not just depicting this, but you're actually, there's this other sense to it that I just think is fantastic. Let's just go to Linda and talk about these Wyoming landscapes that she's doing. And then Linda,
Hi, Rose.
hi. Um, so Linda's been in the show for a number of years, and you are just a favorite of mine and a favorite of our Coors show um, um, people because of the work. And again, you are capturing, like, to me, the heart and soul of the land. And it's and this beautiful quiet sense in the land, and something that um, I don't know that a lot of people know about you, but on Thanksgiving, which is coming up, at least last year, you and your husband, what do you do? You have a ritual with you take a sheep wagon.
No, we don't take the sheep wagon. The sheep wagon has gone back to the ranch that it came from, but we do
Oh,
have a little trailer, and we're thinking of. For many years, we've piled the whole Thanksgiving dinner, the whole 9 yards, and the turkey and dressing and pies and everything, and put them in coolers. And there's a hot cooler and a cold cooler, and we take it out into some windswept place. Um, so we don't eat outdoors because it's always too awful cold. But
yeah.
we either sit in the car or with all the best crystal and all that. So it's
Oh
just
my
kind of
God.
fun. Yeah.
So to me, I think that just like somehow that when you told me that story, that just clicked in my mind that I'm like, she is able to paint these landscapes the way she does because you actually go out and have a feast in the landscape. It's not just like what you see out the window. You are in there, and just being a part of it and observing, and bringing those observations into the studio. So
Well,
let's talk about the paintings that you have for
uh,
us this.
yeah, this big one right behind me, and I see everything mirrored. I don't know. I don't suppose it really matters, but
What do you, sorry, say it
I
again.
mean, in
Oh,
the
mirror.
painting, this little tree is on my right. So anyway, doesn't matter. I was just going out in Laramie Valley one evening looking for the new moon, which is in the other direction from this. And I never did find it. There were clouds all in the wrong place. But I kept watching this cloud grow and grow and grow. And then I turned around and said, oh, yes, found a side road off the little reservoir. You can't see it here, but there are pelicans on a little spit, which you often see on this little lake. And this is it's a big painting. So, but yeah, I had fun with all the colors that I don't usually use, but and the darkness falling, that the shadows rising along the clouds, and just the last little bit up on top where the sun is still shining, and the sun is down where you're standing. So,
tell me about you just said something, colors you don't usually use.
well, these pinks and purples, and usually you paint. Let's see. Actually, I like this one of these, one cow and all these little calves out there on the prairie in June.
And that's Prairie Day.
That's prairie daycare, because those are not all her calves. They've just all come in and settled down with her. I called a rancher friend to ask if they really do that, and he said, oh yeah, he doesn't know why, but they do. The rest of the herd was off somewhere else.
Oh, so like one mama cow just sort of watches over the babies.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But I liked the emptiness, and the sort of the one curious little bull calf, and all the others just kind of nice green grass, which we don't have here very long, and kind of enjoying the day.
Yeah. Tell me about these other little paintings that I'm seeing.
These are like, I just decided to make these a series. They're not, doesn't mean they're all together, but these are Western Skies 7, 8, and 9. Makes them easy to title that way. And they're all just a foot square, frame and all. And there's a very minimal frame around them. And they're just little glimpses of different skies in the West. I do put a little landscape at the bottom just to let you know where you are. I tried it without, and it didn't really work. But the sky here in Wyoming is just so changeable. The air is so thin that you can really see for so far, and the colors are brighter than you get where there's actually air in the air.
Yeah. And where it holds like dust particles and things like that, so you're
Dust
filtering through.
And moisture. Yeah.
Moisture. Yeah, we don't have any moisture for sure.
No, like this big cloud was really quite far away. It was on the other side of the mountains between us and Cheyenne. And so it was maybe 30 miles away. And at lower elevation, you really wouldn't be able to see it all this clearly.
Right. What are the locations for Western Skies 7, 8, and 9?
Oh, let's see. The one with the little road in it is one of the county roads in the Laramie Valley. And the one with the river, that's the Little Laramie River out kind of in the middle of the Laramie Valley. And then the one with the moon is looking more or less south, so in the Laramie Valley. So I get a lot of mileage out of the Laramie Valley. I don't have to go far from home. I could be more specific, but yeah, they're all within 20 miles of Laramie. All are.
So do you when you find this your landscapes, like Kay drives and drives. I mean, she and her husband take a lot of road trips, but you really find these scenes very close to where your studio already is. Are you hiking, or what inspires you to paint?
I just have never run out of things to paint off of county roads. I really don't hike a lot. I'll get out of the car and, walk a few hundred feet to get the right view. But it's all kind of, I've been doing it so long, I'm kind of familiar with all of it. And I think I watch the skies and I think, oh, it's going to be really good over, off Dutton Creek Road looking toward the Laramie Range. Something like that. Or I think, well, if I go out on the painting with the big pink cloud, if I go out toward Highway 230, I'm going to get a good view of the new moon, which I never did, but I got this instead.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Could you talk about there's another painting that's behind you now.
Yes.
Could we,
Yeah.
yeah. And Helen, you have your hand raised. I'm wondering if you could type your question into the chat box, and then I'll ask that of Linda. So Linda, yes, tell us about this painting.
This is the Little Laramie River near where it joins the Laramie River, north of Laramie, and I'm standing on the bridge. Um, and it's just the sun has just set. You see this little blue band in the sky that indicates the sun is has gone down where you're standing, but the shadow of the eastern horizon is beginning to rise up um, against the sky. So you're looking more or less east. I was actually out looking for a full moon, and it was out of the picture, but I did find this lovely scene. There were actually muskrats swimming around, but I decided they'd be too distracting, so I didn't
Ooh.
include them.
Oh my gosh. Your paintings make me think of that lovely Annie Dillard book, Pilgrim on Tinker Creek.
Mm,
I just always sort of picture you out there, you know, interacting with nature and really observing so closely this nature, just like the clouds and all of this, the skies and how changeable they are and what you're going to get. And I'm wondering if you could talk to me about that and how you're capturing those and then bringing that sense back into the studio when you paint larger.
I do use my camera, but the camera is just it's got a lot of information, but somebody asked me once, well, do you spend a lot of time out, hiking or whatnot? I said, no, but when I'm out there, I pay attention, and I'll take, I don't know, 30 photographs of this river, but then um, you come back in, and as you work on the painting, it all comes back to you if you were paying attention. Um, you can't just copy photographs. You have to be there when you take the pictures, and it all comes back. The feel of the air, the smell. It all. If you were paying attention when you were there and you decided to make a painting, it comes back. And also, all those years of experience, looking for the little the little bits of snow on the rim there, and the little paths made by creatures as they walked along the riverbank. Um,
Yeah.
and my skies, I try to make my skies an even gradation, if that's what it calls for. And I find that really adds to the sense of great space. A painterly sky is great, but it's flat. And if you really want it to carry you off into the unknown, um, I like to make it very smooth. Uh, and it's a contrast with the landscape as well.
Yes. Well, you know what? And so two things. One, I just in talks coming up, like for example, Billy O'Donnell will be on a talk, and his is like when you've seen the surface of his paintings, it's just thick paint
Yeah.
and a lot of it's about the surface,
Yeah.
whereas yours is about the quietude and the
Yeah.
distance. And it sounds to me almost like when you get to painting in your studio, that it's a meditation on the land.
It really is, and it really requires a lot of focus and concentration. Um, and again, bringing back those memories and those feelings that you had when you were standing there fighting the bugs, or your fingers freezing, or whatever it was.
So do you paint much out on location as well?
I don't. I might do little sketches, like little pencil sketches, color
Wow.
notes and things like that. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
No, I find I had to decide this many years ago whether I was going to be a plein air painter or not. And I realized that to be a plein air painter, you have to do subjects that will take you an hour or two. And so lots of, big shapes, lots of contrast. And that's not what I was looking for. I was looking for something that was, you look at it every day and see something new, in an odd way, that it just, um, it's just quiet and endless, and maybe even a little disturbing. I think there's some I think there's some elemental human feeling about, I better not get caught out in the open or the lion might get me. And I bring a little of that into it too.
Oh, interesting. I was just about to ask what's disturbing, but oh, that is
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
There's almost too much
yeah.
space.
There's too much to see, oddly enough. People look at it and say, well, there's nothing to see here, but no, there's too much to see. It's, you can't take it all in, really.
Oh, that's
Somebody looked
beautiful.
at one of my early paintings, one of my big empty ones, and they said, it draws you right in, and then there's no place to go.
Oh, what a wonderful comment.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I've always remembered it. Yeah.
wow, that's wonderful. So I'm gonna go to Luke. And thank you, Linda, but I'm coming back to you, so don't go anywhere.
Oh, no, no.
So Luke Anderson, hello.
Hello.
So you, I mean, speaking of Wyoming, we're kind of having a little Wyoming day today. You were in Wyoming, you went to school in Wyoming and recently moved to Salt Lake. So what precipitated the move?
My wife got a new job at the University of Utah. She's a journalist, so she works at the NPR station here, hosting All Things Considered for the state of Utah. And I was sort of been in Wyoming for at that point 25 years, and just kind of up for a new challenge. So I just say Linda's kind of made me feel quite a bit nostalgic for the Laramie Valley.
Oh my God.
It is, yeah. But the Salt Lake Valley is its own special thing in very different ways. So
So your work, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're a studio painter primarily, and you're I kind of think of you as a Western surrealist. I just made that up. Like I, but I think, I mean, and I really want to talk to you about what you're doing with the work and some specific things. But I also saw you when I saw Kay's work in a show in Cheyenne, and I just fell in love with your work too. And I remember thinking, I don't know what this guy is doing, but I love it. And it is that sort of putting me back on my heels and making me look at and consider not only Western subject matter, but painting in a different way. So can you talk about how some of this, I guess surreal is the term I keep coming up with. How did that develop in your work?
uh, I like the way you put it. I don't know what I'm doing either, but I do what I guess feels right. I don't know. I have a lot of like I grew up reading like I really loved comics. I watched cartoons a lot, and so I think a lot of it derives from that. But I also think I'm just kind of like a weird person and try to let that come through in some ways. Um, the work is sort of like I said, it's inspired by cartoons, and like lately it's kind of been inspired by printmaking and like other forms of media that aren't traditionally associated with traditional oil paintings. But the surrealism is kind of just like I like to use iconic Western imagery and subjects to create paintings with themes that are like more widely applicable to the human experience. So I guess the surrealism came naturally as a way to exaggerate certain things and like removing certain elements, emphasizing others. It just sort of I think made sense to do it that way, but it's lately sort of become this like tension between really graphic, bold, flat shapes, and then like areas of really complex textures and surface qualities, and creating that sort of interplay between the two.
Yeah. So can you talk about the one I've just been dying to ask you about inversion? It's
Mm-hmm.
up behind you. I wonder if you would you talk about that? And What is going on? Ooh, yeah, bring it up close.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So it's again this like this concept of having subjects sort of like isolated in space. But I had this idea a long time ago, and only recently feel like I had developed the skills to actually complete it. And so I think the idea sort of originally came from our relationships to landscape. Uh, we can sometimes be, I feel like as humans in landscape in the West in particular, be somewhat like separated from the landscape in the ways we interact with it and form memories of it. And so it sort of became this weird ballooning idea of, I want to create this painting with an iconic Western subject, but what can I do to sort of illustrate our human relationship to that subject and that landscape? And the simple solution I came up with was just flipping the environment of the painting on its head. And in other ways refers to certain things and like atmospheric conditions, atmospheric conversions. It's one thing we deal with here in the Salt Lake Valley, in particular in the winter, are atmospheric conversions. So
Well,
yeah,
okay. Would you also tell me about the cowboy behind you as well?
yeah,
And this one too, again, if when you're watching this, do click on these paintings on the Coors Show site, because you can really see the richness of the colors in all the artist's work for sure. It's really great.
yeah. I would really, encourage people to look at the high resolution images because I've recently started incorporating a lot of reductive methods in my painting that reveals things from earlier iterations and stages. So there's a lot of really, really subtle color thing and textural things going on. But this painting was a lot of times my landscapes are not specific places, but this one actually was. It was just an empty area on the off the highway through the Navajo Nation in northern Arizona on a road trip that I took with my brother last year. And again, just using an iconic Western subject in the cowboy. But the title, I really think titles are important to paintings. I don't think that if they were meaningless, we wouldn't have them. And I like using titles to add extra meaning to it. So it's called Nowhere is a Place That I'd Like to Go. And it's sort of just about how open space, empty space, isolation can actually sometimes be an appealing thing to go and reflect, go explore, go and like be yourself without any fears or repercussions. So that was sort of the conceptual basis, and then the rest of it is kind of an actual like technical painterly exploration and techniques and mediums and methods.
It reminds me of this Susan Sontag quote that she wrote, "I haven't been everywhere, but it's on the list."
Yeah, I like that idea of everywhere and nowhere, and how they're kind of synonymous at the same time they're antonyms. I think that's a really interesting concept.
So,
Yeah.
so tell me about whiteout. Yeah, and turn the screen that way. Thanks.
This is actually an example of one that didn't turn out anything the way like I had envisioned it when I started. I totally completely changed the composition because the first one just wasn't working out, which is just a struggle that I think every artist can attest to at some point in their in their career. But it just became about again, using like an animal as a proxy for our own experiences here in the West, and this is a particularly Wyoming influenced scene, of a ground blizzard where it's not snowing, but you still can't see the sky in the middle of the day. And so I used various glazes of thin white paint to sort of wash out what I'd already painted, and then went back in with outlining to sort of bring back certain details. But really, a lot of these paintings are just so good in person, so much better because of the different brush strokes and the way the light hits it. Um, just really brings it a really like nice dynamic quality to it
Oh, yeah.
as you pass by the piece.
That's gorgeous. Well, and you can see these, like I'm looking at it online right now as we're talking, and you can see the layering too that's still coming through. But I'm glad that you're explaining that you've come back over and over, and so the initial painting is still kind of shining, shimmering up through the layers. That's
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, the upper ones are somewhat translucent, so you see some like hints of violet and blue and you know yellowish tones sort of coming through.
That's wonderful. That is gorgeous. Okay, thanks, Luke. I'm going to come back to you too. Hey, Linda, I'm wondering if you would talk about how art became a thing in your life. Where did you study, and give us some of that background about you.
It's a winding road. I started in college as a nursing major that lasted half of my first semester. And I took a really good drawing class, and I thought, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but I need to be an art major. And I got a degree in art, and in order to keep myself sane and get enough credits to graduate, I took zoology classes at the same time. And then I thought, well, I really love this. And I came back and got a second bachelor's in zoology. And I kept painting all the time. Went on to grad school at the University of Utah, by the way, in biology. And then I got to spend a summer in the field by myself in a remote corner of northeastern Utah. And I thought, all the good scientists I know think about it all the time. And I'm just here in this place looking out over down below on the Green River and thinking, I just need to paint big empty Western landscapes, and I have no idea how to do it, but that's where my life needs to go. So, and then many twists and turns after that. I've been doing it a long time now. So I'm an overeducated artist.
Thanks, Linda. Hey, Kay, tell us about how you got into art and studied it and all that good stuff.
Well, I grew up on a family farm in Nebraska. Actually, we still had it up until last year. I was helping to run it, and I got my undergraduate degree in art from the University of Nebraska, and wasn't really sure what I was going to do, so I decided to become a librarian, and I went to graduate school at Columbia University, and all my friends were getting jobs at various universities out east. I decided I'm going to go live in Wyoming because I always wanted to live in Wyoming. We've always taken family vacations out there, and I thought this is my chance. And so I got a job as a librarian at the University of Wyoming. And during that time, the whole time, I've always been painting. So even though I was working at this job and that job, I was still painting, doing still lifes, or I was doing landscapes. And then met my husband there in Laramie, and we moved down to Colorado here, just kept painting and painting. And I took a class with Kevin Weckbaugh here in Denver a few years ago, kind of got familiar with the people in the Denver area. And the painting, the art people in the Denver area. And I guess I'm another overeducated artist too. Retired
Yeah.
from being a librarian, wound up selling the farm, like I said, but I've just been painting the whole time. So it's been good.
Wow. And I think it's interesting. It's just sort of a fascinating thing with so many artists in our genre here of realism, but also looking at the Western United States, that so many artists come from a different and unlikely career path, and then they come to art, but you bring this different way of looking
Mm.
that the West, that you look at the West coming from with your different perspectives, of biology and the idea of librarians and being in libraries and that sorting and quiet space. And I think it's just really fascinating how you bring something different that isn't necessarily, I went to these art schools and studied these things. So and coming back to and deciding you want to be in Wyoming, maybe missing the big landscapes of the West. And
I think it's a calling. I know when I was growing up, it was in the eastern part of the state, and so all of the land was divided. It was fenced off. It was plowed. It was turned. There was very few actual, just wild, truly wild spaces, like they've always been. And so coming out west, you see the land as it always has been, and you see it untouched by humanity, and it's a spiritual thing, and I think it's a calling actually to come out
oh, I
west.
like that. I like that. I'm going to go to Luke Anderson. I'm going to send you the same question, Luke. Tell us about your background, your education in art, and how, or not in art, but how you came to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I entered college as a psychology major, which, like Linda said, I lasted in that for about a week before I decided it wasn't for me. And then I didn't have any idea what I wanted to do after that, and so I had always been into art and was always drawing and painting and stuff throughout school. I think my teachers and family recognized that as an aptitude of mine fairly early. And so I thought, well, I don't know what else I want to do or what else I'm good at, so I might as well, maybe I'll major in art. And I did that for 2 semesters, but I felt like it just wasn't right for me at that time. So I ended up getting my degree in American Studies, which is kind of just a humanities degree with a focus on the United States. And then I had a double major in environment and natural resources, sort of like environmental studies, land use, that sort of thing. And I think I had quit art for a couple of years actually. There was a period where I didn't make any art at all and let it just sort of, I got kind of burnt out on it, just focus on other things. But I think it became clear maybe as I was getting through college and my first couple of years working in other fields that I don't want to use the word destined, but that I just always had this feeling that I wouldn't really be truly satisfied doing anything else other than art. And I just picked up sort of from scratch in about 2016. And essentially, I sort of consider myself an undereducated artist because I feel like I have been and still am kind of just flying by the seat of my pants and trying to figure things out as I go. So I do consider myself, for all intents and purposes, self-taught, which has its pros and cons. But I'm sort of one of those chaos theory fatalist people that think I had to go through this very exact route myself to get where I am, and that's fine. So
I think that there's arguments to be made on both sides, of course. The amount of education you have, but then for art, but then you have those teachers and they're in your head. And I think you're second guessing. Whereas if you don't have them in your head and you have the confidence just to try stuff and put it out there, then in a way, you kind of bypass a lot of that angst of, oh, is this right? Or is this what I should be doing? Or, it's kind of a nice way to go about it, I think. And especially, I mean, clearly you have a foundation for drawing and designing, or a natural proclivity to putting these things together, and then adding your own concepts about it. And this, I mean, the surrealism, I mean, that was, to me, it was like, as a curator, I get so excited when I stumble upon an artist who is just kind of knocking my socks off. Like, what is happening here? I just have to talk to this person. And so I'm I love it. I'm glad you're, as far as art, an autodidact, and you have figured this out. And I hope you keep searching down that path, because I think it's a lot of fun.
For sure. Well, I appreciate that.
Hi.
Hi,
Okay.
how are you?
So, hey, do you have some work with you?
Well, the paintings for the show are at my studio in downtown Santa Fe, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, the governor closed that building because of the virus, and that's where the paintings are.
Ah,
So I don't.
okay.
I'm in my home studio right now, and I have a small painting I'm working on, but the paintings that I have for the core show are downtown.
Ah, okay. So we have one online, and so hopefully you can get those images for us.
I can tell
Uh,
you about that. And actually, I have. So when I begin a painting, like the painting that is currently online, is called Mountain Sojourn. And it's about northern New Mexico and Colorado, and just the mountains and that kind of thing, the things that inspire me about that. And this was, I don't know if you can see this, but this was my original compositional sketch for it. And so whenever I design a painting, I begin with this. I always start with an idea, and then create some directionals, make sure it has good compositional flow and that sort of thing, and tells a little bit of a story. And if I'm happy with that, then I will draw it out, everything in full perspective and accuracy on the panel, and begin to paint it. But that's the painting that's currently featured on the website, and it's called Mountain Sojourn.
wow, wonderful. Could you talk a little bit about what inspires these paintings? Because your work is also, you're another person who does work that is based on life, but it just takes this big turn in a different direction, to be more of ideological, or I mean, there's just something different going on there. And I'm wondering if you would just talk about that. And I know you moved out to the West. You were more in the in the East or Midwest, and your work. Talk about that too, because your work took a change when you came out West, and that's when
Absolutely.
I got to know you.
Yes. So I was living in the Midwest. I was born in the Midwest, and for the most of my life lived there. And I was living in Wisconsin and Minnesota, and had always enjoyed art, and I've always been interested in being an artist since I was young, and had been inspired. One of my favorite paintings was "Persistence of Memory" by Salvador Dali, and so that's a movement that always inspired my work. And Georgia O'Keeffe was one of the first artists that my mother introduced me to, because she was from Wisconsin as well. And of course, O'Keeffe is a modernist, or was a modernist, and that's a big part of my work. And then painters like Thomas Hart Benton, who was the father of regionalism, was a Midwestern painter, And that's another big inspirational artistic movement in my work. And so I started coming to Santa Fe in the early 90s, and was immediately drawn to the place in a spiritual sense. You know, it either has that impact on you, or I think it has no impact at all. And so for me, I knew it was a place that I eventually wanted to live in and pursue my art full time. And so I went back and forth for 10 years, still continuing to work in the profession I was in before pursuing art full time, which was I worked in advertising and illustration. And so, but in 2001, I was able to cut that cord and to come out to Santa Fe and pursue uh, working as a full-time artist. And so, I realized that one of the things that was really important, because there are so many people painting, is having your own unique style, your own unique way of seeing things. And that to me was one of the biggest issues. I had trained as a realist. I had trained when I was in my teens. I had done an apprenticeship to become a wildlife artist. So I trained as a realist, but at the same time, I had all these other spheres of influence for my work. And so I set out to create my own unique way of visualizing and expressing myself with art.
You know, I think it's interesting that you bring up Thomas Hart Benton too, because I know when I'm talking to people about your work, when we can be in person, people will, if they're familiar with Benton's work, who was born in Missouri, and really that, at the time he really did that regionalism and that style that he evolved had a huge impact on American art and a lot of artists. So, and certainly developed a style as you've developed your style and your way of looking at, in particular, New Mexico. So I think that's always just a wonderful thing for people to know, that art isn't created in a vacuum. I think there's this concept that artists live in this studio and they're isolated and then they go have cocktails or whatever. But we're all influenced by each other, and we're all thinking and talking about things, even during COVID, which is, I think, so wonderful about these Zoom calls, because we can hear what everybody's thinking and talking about and doing. And I like the tie-in with what we're talking about today, because I think everybody, whether it appears to be like Linda's, that is very realistic, but there's so much underneath what Linda has going on, to Kay really adding in this human interaction with the land, Luke's surrealism, and then yours also to this extent of this New Mexico regionalism. I mean, it just says so much. It creates this whole story about the West, which I really love. And you mentioned something about being an illustrator and breaking away, and I want to ask you just a little bit more about that before we get to our end here, which has come very quickly. I always tell people some of my favorite artists to work with are former illustrators. And I'm wondering if you would talk about that, your time as an illustrator, and how that has influenced your current work.
Sure. Working as that's changed a lot. I mean, really, I got into the illustration and started to do it in the late 80s and in the 90s. And by that point, illustration had changed a great deal from the golden age of illustration. And the last illustration job I had was actually through an art director who lived in Las Vegas, New Mexico. And it was for a company called Learning Curve International in Chicago. And I illustrated the character Madeline for a year, or for about 10 months. And so not in the style I paint at all, but it was still, you kind of learned how to adapt yourself. And I think that one really important takeaway from being an illustrator is that you do really understand, you understand composition very well, and you understand how to put things together really well. And that's one thing I learned from it at any rate. And you also learn about, working, professionally, I meet a lot of artists in Santa Fe, and they're like, how do you get inspired? I'm like, well, I get inspired about 8 o'clock every morning. And and if you don't, I mean, if you don't handle it like a professional career, it's going to be really difficult to actually succeed at it, because it's just like going to a job, and you really have to treat it that way to a certain extent. Not that there isn't that interplay of creativity and all that, but you have to really treat it as a true profession. And so that was a big takeaway from illustration as well. The struggle, I think, sometimes with illustration is that, and this is my own perception of it. So it seems to be a difference between creating a piece of art and doing an illustration, where sometimes, when you're doing an illustration, the narratives are so obvious because you want to get your point across that it can lose some of that artistic intent, that emotional quality that really makes a piece of art. And so there is that fine line, like when somebody looks at something and they call it illustrative, it's usually that, where you're almost giving too much information, where you want to hold some things back and they're subliminal. And that's a really important piece of creating an art from my perspective.
Yeah, excellent. Great points. I think that is really important I mean, you've got to be professional about it, but then also there has to be that shift from illustrating to creating a piece of art. That is something that comes from within inside each of the artists. So I love to end these with each of you. If you have a question for one of your fellow panelists this afternoon, if you all want to just unmute, or if you have questions, then let me know. And
I'll ask Luke, what surface do you use?
Mostly canvas. This one was my first foray into gesso board. It's an ampersand gesso board panel.
It's different, isn't it?
Yeah, obviously really slick, and it shows a lot of more subtle brushwork than a canvas would. So I like them both. I like sometimes having rigid surfaces for more detailed work. Sometimes I'll mount canvas to it like a wood panel just to have that rigidity, but keep the texture of the canvas.
And Kay, you work on board too.
I do.
That
board
flat surface, right?
And then I work on, let's see. Oh yeah, one of my small pieces for the show is on Arsh's oil paper. And so that's kind of a unique surface to work on. It's almost absorbs like a sponge when you initially work on that. And then as you start building up successive layers, then it has a nice slightly rough finish. So that's the other material I use.
And Linda, how about you? You're a combination. Are you a canvas and board?
For the bigger ones, I use stretched Belgian linen. And then for the small ones, since you get into stretcher bars and all that, I use the same linen, only I have evolved a complicated method for mounting that linen on board, because I like the canvas texture.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And Bill, you're water media and you're on paper.
Actually, you know what? I switched a few years ago to a product called Aquaboard, and it's made by Ampersand, and it's a lot like gesso board. I painted on gesso board as well, but it's a really a terrific product, and it's a little like paper, but it's also like gesso board, so it offers the best of both worlds.
Very nice. Well, I want to thank you all. And looks like we have a comment. Enjoyed meeting all the artists, seeing their work, and hearing them share their inspiration and processes. Thanks for that comment, Susan. Okay, question Kay. Has Kay ever talked with anyone working in or with the owners of the building she's painted? I imagine the experience would also inform the stories associated with her works.
No, I haven't. When I take pictures, it's sort of surreptitiously, and no, I haven't actually. I imagine that'll happen in the future, but so far it hasn't happened yet.
That's interesting.
But
Wow. Yeah, good
say-
question.
Yes, that's a good question. Yeah, and I sometimes I think, well, I wonder if they'll see this painting and what they'll think of it. But I've just never gotten around to approaching the owners of the buildings.
Yeah,
No, I haven't.
a little shy.
Maybe.
Yeah. So Donna Devine says, thank you so much. What a great way to connect with the artists. I always learn so much. Thanks to all the artists, very informative, so much fun. Actually listen to the artists talk about their work. Thank you all. That's from Fisher. So I want to remind everybody listening to go to the website. We are getting more work up every day with the artists. The show will be for sale through a software online called Hand Bid. All of this is going to be on CoorsWesternArt.com. So you can go there and get all of this information. You can start bidding on December 18th. The bidding goes through January 5th and ends at 8 p.m. We'll have a little virtual opening kind of fun on that evening. So just keep checking and sign in to the website so that we can reach out to you and just make sure you know what's going on. If you have any other questions, you can always email me through the Coors website. And I just want to thank you all for coming, and thank you, Linda, Luke, Kay, and Bill.
Thank
So
you, Rose.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Rose.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Rose. It's such an honor to be in this show. I just
Yes,
love
it's an honor. Thank you.
Well, thank you. All right, everybody, take care. I'd say drive safely, but maybe it's more be careful walking through the living room to the
Bye-bye.
Right.
We'll let the dog out now.
yes, good plan. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.